Debugging code is hard. It feels harder when you're debugging UI code. The most prominent tool which is helpful for most of us developers is the Chrome developer tools. I have used Firebug with Firefox, but in the recent times, since I have sticked with Chrome, I use Chrome developer tools. In this video, I'm going to share some of the tips and tricks which I use in debugging UI code. Let's get started. If you're not aware, in order to navigate to the Chrome developer tools, you can right click on a web page and click on the inspect option, which will take you to a split screen, something like this. And this is what is the Chrome developer tools. You can obviously see the Chrome developer tools in the right side or in the left side or however you want. I'm just going to show you below so that it's easy for us to view. Let me maximize this so that we can see it clearly. Here I have twitter.com. I'm going to try and debug twitter.com if there is an issue. And what are the different options which Chrome developer tools provide in order to navigate within the website. One of the newest feature which Google introduced as a part of the Chrome developer tools is something called Lighthouse. This is a pretty recent feature which came few years ago, and I'm not sure if you already are aware about Lighthouse. Lighthouse is used for identifying and fixing the performance which is specific to your website. Right now I have opened twitter.com, so let's try running Lighthouse on twitter.com. We have an option to select the device on which our website should be run. So for example, let's say I select mobile website. Twitter.com will be loaded as a mobile website, and then the performance will be run based on these categories. Right. So let me click on the generate report and see what happens. So notice that in the background, I can see that the website is getting opened using the mobile as the device type. Lighthouse is trying to do audit. It runs a lot of tests, and then it is trying to come up with some metrics. So these are the metric results. So there are different categories in which tests are run. So first one is the performance, then we have accessibility, best practices, SEO, and the progressive web app. So if you click on performance, you can identify metrics on how well our website is performing. For example, here it says the speed index is 3.6, largest content paint, and I mean it takes a while to paint. Twitter.com looks like. There are different opportunities as well which we can work on. For example, there are unused JavaScript code which this is suggesting, right? So Lighthouse helps us in identifying some things which needs to be fixed, right? And it tries to give a score to it. So if you look at best practices, it can tell you what kind of changes you can do in order to make your website load faster. For example, it says serve images with low resolution so that it can be loaded faster, right? That is one suggestion for the best practice. There are like some more as well. There is something called SEO, which is the search engine optimization, which can tell you how easy is it for the Google or any search engine to identify and search your website. So these are different metrics which you can use. This will be helpful when you're creating new websites and you want to improve the performance, your accessibility, and in terms of searchability in the internet. So that is one of the major tool which I use when I want to fix my websites. There is of course a security tab which can tell you the certificate. If you want to identify certificates, if you have root certificates, if you have certificates within your domain, if you have sub certificates, you can identify certificates, their expiry, and all those information here. Right now if you see, there are only two origins, api.twitter.com, and then you have a twitter.com. So there will be a root certificate which will satisfy again api.twitter.com. Coming to the application tab, this is one of the most useful tabs. There are a lot of new things which are present here, and many things might be unknown to you. The first one is the storage. There is something called IndexedDB, which is in-memory or database for your browser. So if you want to store some data within your browser and then you want to retrieve it much faster, but you want to do it like a database, that's when you go for IndexedDB. So if you see here, there are three different databases. One is called local forage, there is something called horizontal web, and there are like key value pairs within them. There is something called sync, which has again some key value pairs. I think there are not much right now in this database, but if you want to store data and retrieve them faster, you can do that using the index database. The next useful option is the session storage. So if you go to session storage, you have a lot of session information stored inside the browser. You can identify what are the session information. If there is any problem with the session variables and things like that, you can identify using the session storage. There is also a local storage using which you can store data and then retrieve them in the same fashion like a session storage, but it'll be specific in this machine. There is also a cookies tab using which you can identify what are the different cookies which are stored inside your browser as well. You can also use the cache storage in order to identify if there are any files which are cached for this particular web page. So see here, there are a lot of caches which are specific to the JavaScript files. These are some of the features which I leverage for debugging my website. There is also clear storage which can tell you and which can clear data within the storage forcefully. So you can just clear the storage specific to the site by using clear site. Generally what we do is we go and refresh the data for the whole browser, but if you want to do that specifically for this site, you can leverage the clear storage here, and then you can clear just like this. Memory is something which is used for profiling, but I've never used it much. Performance is nothing but the performance which we saw here. So you can use the performance tab to identify the performance of the website, which Lighthouse helps for us. Network, I'm pretty sure most of you would have used network tab. So you use it when you want to identify what happens for a request. For example, network shows you what all requests are happening. For example, here let's say the twitter.com logged in, and you can see the network of calls which are going through. Right now, if I click on a specific call, you can see what are the headers, what is the web URL, what is the status code, what are the response headers, request headers. You can even see the response. So if I see any specific JSON files, so for example here it's returning branch view enable true, the request is api.branch.io, etc. If you want to debug what request was sent from the browser and what are the different responses which we received, you can definitely use the network tab. You can also clear the data if you want. You can also have filters enabled here. If you also want to preserve the logs, you can enable the preserve logs option. If you want to disable the cache, you can also do that here. The next most useful feature is the sources tab. Sources help you in identifying and adding line breaks when you want to debug your website. You can look at HTML files, image files like this by navigating through the setup here. Also, if you have a JavaScript code or your HTML code, you can add line breaks so that you can debug your website live. The moment you add a line break and if you refresh your page, you will be able to hit your line breaks and you will be able to move like how you debug within your IDE. So sources tab is similar to your remote debugging option, but it does help you in debugging within this browser. It may not be the same what you would see in the source code, but still it will help you in identifying and navigating and debugging your website from the browser. You can also have breakpoints, you can have scopes, you can have variables, all those can be added here. The next useful option is the console. So console is where most of the time you will try to add or do debugging. This is like the Alt F8 option or the debugging option or the evaluate expressions in IntelliJ. So here you can try adding JavaScript code, it can tell you the result. So if you want to run JavaScript code and you don't have any JavaScript or a Node.js kind of a library installed, you can definitely open your browser and start coding in JavaScript here. It can also help you in identifying and warning you if there are any errors in this website. So if you see here, it's showing that there are some warnings or errors which are trying to show up when this particular JS file or file is getting loaded. Of course, there is an elements tab using which you can navigate within your website and you can directly go to your source code in case you want to see what is the value or whatever is present in this HTML code or JavaScript code. These are some of the options which I try when I try to debug and find any issues. I hope you found it useful and learned something new from this particular video. As always, if you like the video, go ahead and like it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to it. Meet you again in the next video. Thank you very much.